But am I saying that I'm better than you? I guess I'm going a little further than you are. Yeah, I'm fucking better than you, okay? Much better than you. You are garbage, okay? If you get a rise out of attacking the powerless, you're garbage. And you can call me a social justice warrior. You can call me whatever the fuck you want. At this point, I don't give a shit, okay? That's it. That's who I am. And it is what it is. Allure magazine is in the middle of a cultural appropriation debate after they featured a tutorial article teaching white women with fine, silky hair how to have an afro. Okay, so they specifically featured a white model who is, it's kind of incredible because with the afro she looks biracial, but when she doesn't have the afro she looks like the whitest woman on the planet. So there's the example. Very beautiful woman, but it's interesting because the Allure article made it seem as though an afro is either a costume or a stylish, trend-setting thing, a way to be edgy with your style. They didn't mention anything about, you know, the symbolism of an afro. Of course, it was a huge symbolic thing for the black community during the civil rights era. Women would wear their hair, men would wear their hair in afros in order to make a statement about black pride. And again, this opens up the discussion about cultural appropriation, something that we did discuss on the show regarding Kylie Jenner and her hair in cornrows. And it's a very complex issue, but the deeper you delve into it, the more you realize that cultural appropriation actually is a really big problem. And the reason why is because there is a double standard of beauty. White women get away with doing these hairstyles, whereas black women get discriminated against for doing these hairstyles. A lot of black women are basically forced into straightening their hair in order to get jobs, whereas if a white woman does it, she's considered edgy and she's, oh, look at her, she's breaking boundaries. So I have a perfect example illustrating that for you guys in just a second, but I want you to jump in a little bit and tell me what you think.
I agree with you. It's insensitive. I mean, if you're going to do this article, you need to make reference to the African-American community. Excuse me, African-American culture, the black culture, our experiences, what this meant to us. And also, it's just as easy as to have this white model put a black model there next to her, or have a black hairstylist, and have everyone be involved in this conversation. See, what happens is when you exclude the African-American whose hair naturally would be kinky and curly and would go into the form of an afro, and say, hey, this is some new fashion trend, that's the issue. You know, that's when it becomes a problem. Like, include everyone in the conversation and make sure that we do not feel like you're taking away from our culture and what means so much to us.
Also, I think the biggest issue is just the double standard.
Yeah,
like just the discrimination that black women face for doing the exact same thing that Allure is applauding for white women.
Just hours after meeting with President Obama at the White House, the clock kid, Ahmed Mohammed, announces that he is leaving the United States and moving to the Middle East. The Mohammed family deciding to relocate from Texas to Qatar after the teenager accepted a scholarship from the Qatar Foundation for Education, Science, and Community Development. Well, this is the latest honor for Ahmed after he was led out of school in handcuffs when a teacher mistook his so-called clock for a bomb. You can see a picture of it right there. Well, last week he was honored by a war criminal, the president of Sudan, who's accused of assisting in the genocide in Darfur.
So, I mean, the part obviously that I love about there is she called it a so-called clock.
Did it work?
It's a clock.
Did it work though? I didn't see it ticking.
It worked.
Oh, you believe?
It's a photo. If you saw it ticking in that photo, the only photo you could see it ticking in is Apple's new live photos, which I call videos. But I don't know if it actually ticked or if the battery life wasn't very long.
That's why it's a so-called clock.
So-called clock.
There's so many different angles with the story. We brought it up this morning, and John wasn't too sold on it. But it's just, again, he met with the president of the Sudan, who his father ran against 2 times
for
president, and then now they're buddy with.
Which is a little strange.
Yes, you look up, and you go, okay, what? And then but when you hear reports that come in like this, and they start going, Qatar, and also there was an article by Breitbart. There's multiple points in this where they point out Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Sudan, these dictatorial nations that are all agreement. Well, you know, Saudi Arabia. Let's not talk about how horrible they are, because when we need things from them, we're very nice. So, I mean, it all comes when you need it. But I looked up the Qatar Foundation of Education, Science, and Community Development, which is the program he was, the Young Innovators program he was accepted into for the scholarship. As we throw that out there, like he's going to Qatar to go to this terrorism university, And then after learning terrorism, it's the day after he met with Obama. What information did Obama give him to go take to Qatar? So I mean, it leaves these things in your head, which is why all the previous things about Obama being a Muslim and being un-American stays in the backs of Fox News brains like this, and it all gets connected. It's connect the dots. So on their website, I don't know if I got permeated with any of the terrorism, but
you're being tracked by the FBI.
They point out how they have partner universities, including Carnegie Mellon University in Qatar, Texas A&M in Qatar, Georgetown University School of Foreign Service in Qatar, Virginia Commonwealth University in Qatar, and Northwestern University in Qatar. All of those universities have terrorism ties, apparently. Wow. So you don't point those things out because it's just a university, or it's a schooling for, I think they start from preliminary to doctorate level programs. So yeah, people can go to another country where there are bad things happening and get an education in this particular school. And another young innovator that was in the program at the Carnegie Mellon University in Qatar is currently pursuing his graduate studies at MIT. So he came back.
Ooh,
so I'm saying, like all these, they openly boast these things because it's not a big deal. But I can understand having a problem or wondering why he's meeting with a war criminal president, which we had a war criminal vice president just last cycle.
Yeah.
So it's painting the picture a certain way.
It's a very strange story overall.
It is that's why I like the layers of this, though.
Yes.
But it's a curious thing for him to go to. I have to say, I'm going to be the bear in the room here.
Okay.
It's a curious thing for this kid, 14-year-old kid. His father's from Sudan. Okay. That's where he was born. His father was born. So he's Sudan. He worked super hard. He came to New York, and he was a singing hot dog salesman or whatever, and worked his way through.
Was he really?
And yeah, and now his son's made this clock, and he's gone. But it's to go to Qatar. They're not known as a warm, fuzzy country. Their immigration policy isn't the best. They do have indentured slave trade there, which is what they're building. Their infrastructure they're building for the World Cup. All of those other things, there's all of that corruption, all of that economic disparity has been amply, demonstrated and illustrated. So it is. So for me, it's just weird that this kid would then get offered a spot at this university to go there. I don't have a problem with him going.
It could be a PR move.
Voters in Houston have voted against the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, which would have created protections for many different groups of people living in the area, including members of the LGBT community. Now, supporters of the ordinance had said it would have offered increased protections for gay and transgender people, as well as protections against discrimination based on sex, race, age, religion, and other categories. Now, why would anyone vote against this? Well, the reason why it did not pass is because there was a very strong campaign against this ordinance. And the campaign basically used scare tactics to make parents believe that their young female daughters would have to shower with male students who think that they're females. That's the kind of campaign that they ran, okay? So in the months leading up to Tuesday's vote, opponents focused their campaign on highlighting one part of the ordinance related to the issue of public bathrooms by transgender men and women that opponents alleged would open the door for sexual predators to go into women's restrooms. Now, we have two examples of those ads for you today, so I want you to take a look at what these scare tactics are, and then we'll tear them apart.
Proposition 1 bathroom ordinance. What does it mean to you? Any man at any time could enter a woman's bathroom simply by claiming to be a woman that day. No one is exempt. Even registered sex offenders could follow women or young girls into the bathroom, and if a business tried to stop them, they'd be fined. Protect women's privacy. Prevent danger. Vote no on the Proposition 1 bathroom ordinance. It goes too far.
I hadn't seen that ad. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I read about it, but I hadn't seen it firsthand. The imagery is so despicable, and the way that they're exploiting cases of rape and sexual assault as an excuse to discriminate against the LGBT community disgusts me. And this is an example of how, even though we're making great strides when it comes to the gay community and in some ways the transgender community, we still have a long way to go because there aren't equal protections for the LGBT community in a lot of different states and municipalities. And this is an example of that. Yeah. That was sick.
It was sick, and it was also stupid because I get, like, if you're trying to make the case that they'll just be able to stand in there and listen to you or be near you or whatever. Okay, fine. Try to make that case. It's stupid, but you can make that case. They're claiming that day that they're a man or a woman or whatever. But if your case is that they're going to go into the stall with your child to rape them, they can do that now. It's a crime, but they can do it. It doesn't make it legal to rape people.
I love in sport. First of all, most sports actually do give men more prize money than they do for the women's like equivalent, right? So that's already at the baseline. And tennis is actually one of the sports where they are trying to even the playing field, especially with pay, even though obviously, as you saw in that graph, we're not there yet. But if you're given so many more opportunities and they're having these advertisements pumped in, you can't even compare them at some point.
So, well, here's my point on that. And on the issue of television, you're right. Men had a big advantage coming in, and people are more used to watching men play tennis, let alone all the sports. On the other hand, women have been on TV playing tennis for a long, long time. I mean, and you can get into the issue of when they got the better slots, etc. But I would be very surprised if TV executives saw good enough ratings from women's tennis and decided, no, I don't want the extra money. Like if women's tennis did better than men's tennis, and of course they know that anybody who works in television as an executive knows
as well.
knows the context of the time periods. Meaning that, hey, for example, if you're starting cable news, right, the lead-in is not going to get as well as the next show because it builds into the next show. In some cases, it's the reverse. So there's a prime time, and after a prime time, there's a fall-off. Every TV executive knows that. And within that context, if women's tennis was doing as well or better than men's tennis, believe me, they changed the time slot.
But I'm saying they're not. They don't even have the opportunity to even see if that's a thing that's going on because they're not putting the same amount of money into advertising, the same amount of money into making like these players seem like these bigger than life individuals. They're spending all that money on the men's side.
Yeah, so they might
so
be
they
wrong.
Can't compare it.
So Hannah, I'm not saying that they are definitively right and that there's no chance that they could be wrong about that calculus, but they are making that calculus, and that calculus, I believe, is driven more by profit motive, which, you know, we take that as for whatever you want to judge that or not judge that, more by profit motive than it is by institutional bias. But I could be wrong. Maybe we go and 10 years, 20 years from now, we realize, no, they were just assumed that the men were going to do better. But when they flipped the time periods or they flipped the marketing budgets, women actually did better. But I'd be surprised because it has been around for a decent amount of time. And I think that the profit motive is strong. If it had already been the case, they probably would have gotten to that point. Interesting developments in the Sam Harris front. He did a podcast interview with Douglas Murray. Please go check out the whole thing. I wouldn't want to take him out of context. We're going to give you full quotes here. Now, he touched on many different things, and he talked about how President Obama is being politically stupid for how he's dealing with radical Islam. And look, I've got my own criticism of President Obama's foreign policy. So, okay, let's leave that alone. You watch the podcast or listen to it and make your own judgment calls on that, okay? Now, I just want to take two quotes here that I found interesting. I'm going to quote them at length, okay, so you get the full context, and then break it down for you guys, okay? So he talked about Ted Cruz and Ben Carson. He's going to talk about how he would vote for Ben Carson over Noam Chomsky. That's the second half. We'll get to that in a second, and why, okay? But first, he's talking about Ted Cruz's points about the Syrian refugees and how he'd only like to take the Christian ones and not take the Muslim ones. Now, that's a religious test. That's normally what people would call un-American, right? And religious tests have not worked out well in the past. But I know you're not allowed to talk about the past, okay? We're just allowed to blame Muslims for now. No, okay, wait. Let's give you the Sam Harris quotes. You make up your own mind, okay? So he says, take the personalities of people on the right out of the equation. Is it crazy to express, as Ted Cruz did, a preference for Christians over Muslims in this process? Of course not. Of course not, okay? So you can say, yes, I have a preference for Christians over Muslims. Okay, now why? Let's keep going. What percentage of Christians will be jihadists or want to live under Sharia law? 0. And this is a massive, in fact, the only concern when talking about security. We know that some percentage of Muslims will be jihadists inevitably. So it is not a mere bigotry or mere xenophobia to express that preference. I hope you understand that I'm expressing no sympathy at all with Ted Cruz's politics or with Ted Cruz. That's a funny way of showing no sympathy, okay. But it is totally unhelpful to treat him, though he actually is a religious maniac, like a bigot on this point. This is quite a reasonable concern to voice. Now, let's break this down. So, he says things that are, on the surface, if you're only looking at the surface, seems reasonable. Wait, the Christians, I guess they're not going to follow Sharia law. That point well made, right? Whereas some Muslims might. So, well, let's do a test and decide which religions we're going to allow into the country. Wait. There was a big jump there. So let's back up for a second. So, for example, in the internment camps, you could have said, well, is there any chance that non-Japanese people are going to do, kamikaze missions inside the United States? Support Japan. We're at war with Japan. They just did Pearl Harbor. Okay? They killed us. And you can't trust them. Not all of them. Not all of them, but some of them. Now, the French didn't do it. The Norwegians didn't do it. The Chinese didn't do it. It was the Japanese. We're at war with them. You have to understand that war. So will the Chinese or the French attack us? No, right? That's obvious. I stated a fact, right? Is it possible that some Japanese might attack us? Well, Sam might say inevitable, okay? But it's certainly possible. Well, I have stated two facts. What? So, we now take the enormous jump. Let's put them into internment camps. Now, it's called an analogy for the Sam boys. Pipe down, he didn't say anything about internment camps. I know, dude, it's an analogy, okay? So in this case, he was very clear about what he said. He said, let's not let the Muslims in. So for those of you who are wondering, wait a minute, you're an atheist, Sam's an atheist. You think Islam is completely wrong. Sam thinks Islam is completely wrong. So where's the disagreement? The disagreement is in the policy. He says Muslims, this is this quote-unquote sophisticated way of saying Muslims can't be trusted. So my policy position, he's saying Ted Cruz, for all that he's saying wrong, is right about this issue. Go back and read it again. Go back and listen to the podcast. Listen to it in this wonderful context, overflowing context. He's saying the policy is don't let the Muslims into the country. You can let the Christians in, don't let the Muslims in. That is a policy I disagree with because those policies lead to very, very bad results. Is that the kind of country we want to be in? I mean, look, we can go ad nauseum here. Well, Tamil Tigers have done suicide bombing, right? So is there some chance that the Tamils would do suicide bombing? It depends on what the situation is, right? Okay, there goes the Tamils. And we can keep doing this all night long, right? Okay, but I think what's even more interesting is the way that he phrases things. So he says, I agree with Ted Cruz. Then he turns around and calls him a religious maniac. So that if you say, hey, wait a minute, you agreed with Ted Cruz, you agreed with his policy position, you go, oh, you're misrepresenting me. And then his fans will all come out and be like, he called him a religious maniac. He called him a religious maniac. Oh, you're misrepresenting him. You're misrepresenting. Yeah, it's a trick, dude. He talks out of both sides of his mouth. Okay? So he's a maniac, but I love him. No, love him is not fair. I'm sure that Sam disagrees with his positions in domestic policy. He says, he's a maniac, but I agree with him on policy, on this policy, right? So when you come back and go, why the hell did you agree with Ted Cruz? I say, I didn't. I called him a maniac. I called him a maniac. You're misunderstanding me. Okay? And plus, on top of that, you have to add, you're misunderstanding me. If you only were sophisticated enough to understand why the Muslims are inevitably dangerous and must be kept out of the country, then you would understand how sophisticated I am.